Dr. Christophe Delong et Kinexa Formation présente.
Welcome to this explainer. You know, we hear it absolutely everywhere right now. AI is completely revolutionizing medicine. It's supposed to give us this perfectly objective, hyper-personalized care. But to really get what's actually happening on the front lines of this tech, we've kind of got to look past all that shiny hype and dig right down into the foundations these systems are actually built on.
Which brings us to a really fundamental question. Is artificial intelligence in healthcare truly colorblind? I mean, we generally just blindly trust algorithms to be perfectly objective, right? It's math. How could it be biased? Well, today, we're going to investigate if this incredible technology might actually just be inheriting our very own human flaws. Because at the end of the day, a machine is really only as objective as the world it's learning from.
And that leads us straight into a massive, overarching concept called AI competence asymmetry. Sounds like a mouthful, but it's basically the phenomenon where AI performs unevenly across different demographic groups, all because of biased foundational inputs. Put simply, it's the reason why these cutting-edge digital tools can have totally different success rates depending entirely on who the patient sitting on the exam table actually is.
Looking at this breakdown here, we can basically trace this whole systemic issue across four distinct pillars. We're talking pulse oximeters, care allocation algorithms, cardiovascular risk scores, and geographic underrepresentation. It's like a giant ripple effect. It literally starts with the physical devices touching a patient's skin and stretches all the way up to those massive, global databases that are currently dictating the entire future of machine learning.
Section 1. Flawed hardware, flawed data.
Let's jump into the physical world first. Think about a device we're all pretty familiar with now, the pulse oximeter. You know, that little clip they stick on your finger at the doctor's office to check your oxygen? Well, the absolutely crucial data point to keep in mind here is the number 3, because it turns out these ubiquitous little devices systematically overestimate oxygen saturation in non-white patients. The result? Black patients are left with a massive 3 times higher risk of having undetected hypoxemia compared to white patients. I mean, 3 times! That is a staggering discrepancy for a basic life-or-death medical measurement.
And here's the real kicker. When that hardware bias integrates into an AI system, it amplifies. It doesn't get smoothed out. If you've got an incredibly smart AI, but the physical data you're feeding it is already inherently flawed, like those skewed oxygen readings we just talked about, the algorithm isn't going to magically fix it for you. Nope, it just takes that bias, propagates it, and amplifies it on an unprecedented scale. It's basically making flawed medical decisions way, way faster than a human ever could.
Moving on to Section 2, Bias in Care Allocation.
So it's not just the hardware gathering the data that's the problem. It's actually the algorithms deciding what to do with it. This brings us to a major issue experts call the proxy trap. Basically, a landmark study found that major algorithms used by massive health systems were systematically underestimating the needs of Black patients. Why? Well, the algorithm mistakenly used previous healthcare costs as a substitute or proxy for a person's actual medical requirements. It just blindly assumed, hey, if less money was spent on your care in the past, you must be healthier. It completely ignored all the complex, systemic reasons why certain populations might have spent less on healthcare historically. Just look at this dramatic jump on the chart. When they used that flawed financial cost proxy, the algorithm flagged only 17.7% of Black patients as needing additional care. But when researchers stepped in and actually recalibrated the algorithm, using direct health measures instead of just looking at financial costs, that number absolutely rocketed up to 46.5%. I mean, wow. That is quite literally the difference between someone getting vital, life-saving preventive care and just being completely overlooked by the medical system.
Which brings us to Section 3, the historical data trap.
But seriously, how do we even begin to fix this if the foundational medical studies themselves are deeply skewed? Take the famous Framingham Heart Study. It's been the gold standard, the cardiovascular baseline, for decades. But because it was based on a pretty homogeneous group of people, it worked fantastically well for Caucasians and significantly worse for African Americans. That led to years, decades really, of inaccurate and inequitable care. The scary part? When we train tomorrow's AI on yesterday's biased history, we're really just automating that inequity.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, Geographic and Genomic Blind Spots.
To really grasp the true scale of this, we have to zoom out and look at the massive global databases teaching our machines. AI is an incredibly data-hungry engine, right? And where that data comes from dictates absolutely everything. It's actually striking. Over half of all clinical AI datasets originate from just 2 places on Earth, the US and China. That means algorithms built on this super concentrated data simply do not generalize to other populations. If you take an AI trained mostly in Boston and Beijing and drop it into a hospital in Brazil or Kenya, well, competence asymmetry isn't just likely, it's pretty much guaranteed.
And get this, the blind spot gets even more extreme when we look at genomics. Roughly 80% of all collected genomic data comes from Caucasian populations. 80%! That leaves a tiny 20% slice of the pie to represent the incredible, vast genetic diversity of the entire rest of the human race. It severely limits how useful genomic research and AI tools are for, well, almost everyone else on the planet. We're essentially trying to build this bold new future of hyper-personalized medicine on a dataset that literally leaves most of the world behind.
So, as we pull back the curtain on all these competence asymmetries, from the pulse oximeter sitting on your finger to algorithms allocating care all the way up to these global databases lacking basic diversity, we're left staring at one vital question. If our AI is learning from a historically biased past, how on earth do we program a truly equitable future? It's the challenge that's going to define the next era of medicine, for sure, and it absolutely demands our attention. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today. And hey, next time you hear about a medical AI breakthrough, remember to ask exactly whose data it was learning from.